Hi, ladies, and welcome back to She Connects. I'm so excited about this week and our friend here, Paula. I love our times of connect the dots. On Mondays, we have Connect with God. That's our scripture where we memorize and we study and we do our small devotional. And then during the week, we're studying it and implementing. And then on Fridays is our Connect the Dots day, where we kind of connect the dots of what God's trying to say and what he's trying to do through us and what we've learned and we're implementing, and it's just a celebration day of all that God is doing. What I love we've been doing recently is these interviews, these time together, these conversations about what God is doing in the lives of women in this group. And so today we have one of our very own. Her name is Paula, and I'm so excited that she's here with us today. She has a powerful story, a powerful God story. And we know what the God story is, right? That's when we have the story and then God comes and redeems it, and he comes in and he heals, and he comes in and restores, and then it becomes our God story. Our story is what's happened to us. But when God comes in and he works through that story, it then belongs to him. So she has a powerful God story. And I don't want to get ahead. I don't want to get ahead of us. So I'll let Paula, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you live and who you are and all that good stuff. By the way, I think you were like number 3 or 4 that joined this group. We're up to 400 ladies now. Yay!
I'm an OG.
But you were in the very beginning. You were like number 4 that joined this group. So that's incredible. But anyway, tell us about yourself, where you're from, and all that good stuff.
Hi, ladies. I'm originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, born and raised, a native all the way. I've lived all over the country. I've lived in different places in the world. Right now, my residency is in Maryland. My husband is stationed out of Bethesda, active duty military. So we move every few years.
Fun. So you've gotten really good at packing up stuff.
Thankfully, we have professional movers.
Oh, goodness.
But I've gotten good at purging every few years.
Oh, yes. Yes. I know it. I know that feeling well. Yeah. So that's awesome. So you're a military wife,
yes.
Which, by the way, thank you. And thank your husband for us. And 4th of July just passed, and we're able to celebrate our country, and that's exciting.
Yes.
Well, you have this incredible story. And so I have some notes here, and I'm going to reference them every once in a while because I don't want to get it wrong.
All right.
We talk about our God story all the time. And a little bit ago, maybe a month and a half ago or so, you shared a little bit of your story when we were talking about Psalm 23. And it touched so many lives. I mean, so many ladies just really connected with your story. And I thought, we got to get her on here again to, in your own words, just tell us about your life. So you wrote out a little bit of your story, and I took some notes because it's incredible. Your story starts the day you were born. Like, you write right here, my God story started the day I was born. I was only 34 weeks when you were born, right?
Yes, yes.
So tell us just a little bit about that, like those first days of your life.
Well, I have 2 older brothers, and they always say that I ruined their morning breakfast because my mother was making oatmeal and had a ruptural placenta, which means that I was coming hard and fast. Mm-hmm. The sac literally ripped away from her uterus. So, they were able to get my mother and I to the hospital before they had to take me via C-section. Mm-hmm. And I was immediately rushed into the NICU, hooked up onto life support, put into an incubator, and they discovered that I needed open heart surgery for a valve, which nowadays, due to medical research and advancements, they can now give the baby medicine in utero to fix it. What? So basically, I had to be a guinea pig to save my life. But that's okay because I'm still here.
Yes. So that was within your first 9 days of life, right? Or so.
I was 7 days old when I had open heart surgery.
Wow.
It was only 4 pounds, 2 ounces. So now my scar seems small in comparison, but my parents say that when I was born, my open heart surgery scar literally took up basically my whole body. It
Right.
wrapped around my whole body because I was
Just
cesarean.
being that tiny, and then my goodness, that's incredible. And it's so cool that God from day one had this plan for your life and was going to turn everything around for good, of course. But before I get ahead of myself, so you were born kind of, it reminds me of like Esther's story. She was born, then she became an orphan, and then she was taken in by Mordecai, and then he got taken. It was like all these things, one after another, after another, after another. And you think, my goodness, how much more can this person go through? Kind of reminds me of your story.
And
So
honestly, my story is only really touching the ice, the tip.
just the tip of the iceberg. I hear you. So we have something in common. You say, I grew up in a household of dichotomy. One side was cold and angry, place full of verbal, emotional, and physical abuse. And then the other side was loving, strict, and Bible-based, where we'll always put on the happy front. I completely understand that one. But, and it's not just me. I think a lot of us have gone through that, where whether it be growing up in our homes that we grew up in, or the home we're creating ourselves.
Right.
A lot of us can understand that, but from a teenager's perspective, from a young person's perspective, what did that do to your faith? So you said you accepted Christ at 3 years old, right?
Right.
Um,
I vividly remember that. I don't for further on in my story, I have memory loss, but I do remember that at 3.
right.
I remember the exact church. I remember the Sunday school teacher who led me to Christ.
Wow.
So I had a faith, but I definitely would very, very much question it.
Right.
Because it just, what I was being taught and what I was seeing rarely meshed.
Right. Right.
So it was very confusing, but something in me really made me hang on somehow. The
Yeah.
grace of God, I guess, because
Yeah, God was in there. He said his word doesn't return void. And so that word was in you. His word, he was in you, and he's always fighting for us, and you can see that in your story. But having those two the two contrasts there of faith and a different life, what did that do for your faith? What road did that put you down?
one of a lot of struggle, a lot of struggle. Um, and I honestly can't blame my parents completely.
Yeah.
Just because now I realize they were doing the best they could.
Yeah.
But it was really hard because it was my dad worked construction, so he would be out on the road during the week. He would come home, and literally the minute his truck pulled up, there was tension because you didn't know, you had no clue what dad was going to be walking through the door. Was he going to be happy? Did he have a good week? And it literally got to where I would hide until I could hear who had walked through the door, because you never knew what to expect. So that was a little difficult because you were dealing with that, and then you would sit down for your evening meal and you would pray for over the meal, and then you would do your evening devotions as a family. And maybe 15 minutes later he was cursing out everybody. But then you would do your nightly prayers, and you would go to bed, and you would bless the family, and you'd wake up, and it was difficult. It was difficult because it was like I was being raised in a Christian household, but yet never I never knew what unconditional love was. And I still struggle with that. Because it was like, you go to church, you hear about unconditional love. You growing up in church, you hear what marriage should be, what family life should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, but this isn't what I'm living.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was just a lot of lip service that I was seeing.
Right.
And that was really hard. But I'm enough of a rebel. And I still consider myself a rebel. I
Yes.
am enough of a rebel that I was like, damn it, this is not how my life's going to be. If I can get through this, and not that I necessarily wanted to grow up fast, but if I can get through this, I'm going to make a difference.
You're gonna, yes, I understand that completely. I understand that completely. And I understand the struggle between what you see and what you hear, what you're told to believe, but not seeing that belief lived out in everybody else's life. And so there's this whole war in your head of what things should be. And at the end of the day, what should be is just our relationship with God. But when you grow up in church and when you're in church all the time, we know our relationship with God matters, but also our relationship with people matter. And I think we kind of they kind of meld together. And so the expectation we have of God becomes the expectation we have of people. And then people let us down, and it kind of just flows over into your relationship with God, and it's just becomes so messy, just horribly messy.
And
So
when you're a kid, you don't understand that. When you're a kid, you don't, you know, you're supposed to feel protected by your parents.
right.
And God is your father. So why isn't your dad acting, or why isn't your mother protecting you? Or
Right.
so yeah. So I turned to a very, very, very destructive.
And that's what I was going to ask next. That was
Yeah.
the next really big chapter in your story. So first you're born into turmoil, and then just your life. You have this war in your mind and your heart, but then the path you decided to take was destructive. Tell us a little bit about that.
Um, I don't even really know what triggered it, but I know that at the age of 12, by that point, as far as I can remember, it was 12. It might have been a little bit earlier. I decided, and it wasn't because I had seen anything on TV. I was raised in a household without TV, so I didn't have that influence. But I did have a grandmother who was obsessed with everybody's weight.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of say that was kind of the trigger point, but something snapped in my head, and I thought, fine, my family life's a mess. The only thing I can control is me. And so I became obsessed with controlling everything that went into my mouth.
Wow.
To where it at first it was, I was small, so I ate small portions anyway. I mean, you're petite. Yeah, I was, this little baby doll practically. But the rule in our household was you do not get up from the table until everything is off of your plate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned very quickly, you don't put a lot on your plate. So I would really control my portions. Mm-hmm. And then when that was becoming noticeable, I would double up on my portions, and then I would stuff myself. And then as soon as my plate was empty, literally, I would excuse myself and go to the restroom and purge. And that became a very dangerous cycle of where I would go from, during the day when my parents weren't paying attention, I would drink water, I would eat a handful of popcorn and call it good. I would have a slice of toast for breakfast and call it good. Maybe keep it down for a half hour. And it just became this cycle that I struggled with for a good 15 years. And it's nothing you ever recover from. I can say that I'm healed and that I've conquered it, but you really it's still in the back of your mind.
Right.
And there are still things that I really have to be aware of that can trigger it.
Mm. Mm.
Because even though I conquered it and finally got healthy 15 years down the road, I'm very aware when I start getting depressed or, I had medical issues. My father died. I really had to watch that didn't become
Right.
triggers.
So how did you get to the point of healing and God touching that part of your life? What brought you to that?
It it was honestly, I was just brought to my lowest. I don't even know how to explain it. When I was about 16, I remember my mother confronted me and said, "Are you having issues?" But there was no follow up.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, "I'm aware you're having issues. I'm going to start watching you closely." It wasn't, "Oh my God, you've dropped weight. You were small to begin with. You dropped weight. Let's get you to a doctor."
Mm.
It wasn't, "Do you need counseling?" Because I was raised in a household where you don't go to a counselor.
Yeah.
Psychology is of the devil. Therapy, no, we can't do that. We're Christians.
Right.
You got to live your faith out. So I would go to church and have hands laid on me.
Right.
Well, and I'm not discounting that, but there's certain things you need help with.
Mm-hmm.
So once I got through high school and all of that, my middle brother actually confronted me when he saw that I was really, really spiraling. He was like, basically, screw it. If mom and dad aren't going to do anything about it, I'll take you to the hospital.
Mm.
And legally at that time, he didn't even really have a right because I was still a minor.
Okay.
But they allowed me to check myself in. And that started the healing process, but it didn't conquer it.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to put some weight on and kind of stay balanced for a while, but then I would get triggered later on.
Mm-hmm. So it was a journey. It was a journey of healing for you, a long journey, but God has brought you through that.
Thank God.
Yes. Isn't God incredible with that? And what you see with your life over and over and over is God just has his hand over and over and over. And no matter what path you took or path you were pushed down, that God was there the entire time. As I read your story, it's incredible. So you get out of high school and all of a sudden now you're going you're in Bible college and you're going to Russia. Tell us.
That was crazy. That was a really crazy time. I got out of high school. I left at the end of my junior year because of a lot of drama. And at that point, after going through my junior year of high school, I was like, now is the time. I need to get serious about my faith.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was always a rebel. Yeah. And that really saved me. I rededicated my life to Christ. And our church had a local Bible school, and I knew it was going to be intense. And I don't come from a family with money, so I couldn't rely on my parents to put me through it. So I worked 2 part-time jobs and went to school full-time for a year straight of intense study. And one of the requirements to graduate was we each had to go on a month-long missions trip overseas. So when we graduated, they basically dedicated us to Christ and commissioned us for the mission field and for ministry. And one of the trips that we could go on was Russia. And I chose Russia. Part of it was, yes, I wanted to do missionary work, but part of it was I knew some of my family had come from Russia,
Okay.
And I wanted to go over there and see if I saw anybody that looked like me. Just walking down the street, because I was like, my relatives could be here.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a dual purpose trip on that, but it really kind of lit a fire in me, definitely. But it
That,
was a struggle. It was a struggle.
yeah, that's awesome. To go to the mission field, to go to Russia and preach and teach the good news of Jesus. And you say here that you did it street ministry. What does that look like? What is that?
Okay, so when when I look back at this, I don't even know why my parents, of course, they couldn't say no because by then I was of legal age.
Yeah.
But what parent in their right mind would let their 19-year-old girl who's 5 foot tall, her first major mission trip other than Mexico, other than Juarez,
Yes.
was let's fly across the world to Moscow, Russia. Um, this was just 4.5, 5 years after the wall had fallen.
Wow.
So it was relatively, it was a mess. Moscow, Russia was a mess.
Okay.
We were doing street ministry, which was you get your permit from the local government and you go out in front of the metro stations and you preach the gospel. We were literally doing street preaching, and believe it or not, I was doing skits in full-on makeup. We were doing mimes, because
Wow.
if you do mimes, you don't have to know the language, and you can still get the message across. So, I was painting up my face and
That's incredible. Well, whatever way we need to preach the gospel, whatever that looks like. And that's really cool because it tells people there is no set way to do it. It doesn't have to be on a stage. It doesn't have to include a microphone or a platform. It's wherever God sends you. And so he saved you when you were born for that moment and on, obviously. So you ended up becoming a missionary in Hungary where you helped lead a women's ministry in a local church. So, and helping with troubled teens. My goodness, that's incredible. Tell us about that.
That was crazy. I did not want that position at all. I wanted to work in the women's ministry. I was all about that. I was ready to help the pastor's wife lead the women's ministry. Um, I ended up being housed with a Hungarian national. That's how they teamed you up.
Okay.
So my roommate was a Hungarian national from the church. Her ministry was to work in, they call it the Locatella. So the Locatella is basically a juvenile prison for troubled teens. And it was for troubled girls. In that country, they do like they do over here, where the girls are separate from the boys.
Okay.
The difference is it's anything from petty crime to horrible crime to just being abandoned by your family. And in Europe, there's a lot of gypsies. So a lot of the girls that are abandoned or in trouble are gypsies.
Okay.
And my roommate was like, well, hey, I need some extra help at the girls' home. Would you be willing to? And I was just like, at this time I'm 22 when I was over there. And I was just like, I really don't like teenagers. I was a brat. I really don't, my teenagers were horrible. I really don't want to. And she was just like, no, I think you really would be good in that spot. And so I just kind of jumped out on a wing and a prayer and some faith, but I was just like, okay, here we go. And that is this time because I've never been to a girl's home, but you get buzzed and you get into one section, doors locked behind you with a click. Buzzed in again, you have to be frisked to go in. They search everything on you when you go in. They search everything on you when you come out. And you're dealing with some pretty intense situations. There was a lot of spiritual warfare going on.
can imagine.
during that time. Because in Europe, there's a lot of sex trafficking that goes on, and they like to use the girls' home for that. So we were facing that. We were facing. There was only so many girls that we could take out on the weekends. So every weekend we would try to take a few more out, because the poor girls didn't understand that visiting weekend and with these older men making them feel good and giving them gifts, and it was a horrible situation. So we were dealing with that. We were dealing with, dealing with stories, and every story of living, you're facing different things. One of the floors was never witchcraft. One of the floors, everybody floor was a lesbian, because their leaders were their a group mothers were lesbians. I mean, it was the minute you walked in, you felt the evilness and the brokenness and the hurt. And that was, honestly, that was a time when my eating disorder really kind of raised its ugly head again. And I knew it was spiritual. I knew where it was coming from. But that didn't make it any easier.
No, absolutely not. So you did worked with these young ladies and brought Jesus to them. And how did that change you? How did it bring healing into your life at all, to see others, to help them through their struggle? How did it change you?
It helped me forgive myself, if that even makes sense. Because I knew that I wasn't in the wrong, but I was able to step out and see myself in these girls. Yeah, so that was it. It was healing, and God knew what He was doing when He stuck me in that position, even though I didn't want it. Yeah. But it definitely helped me forgive my childhood to an extent. I won't say that at that point I completely could forgive it, but I was able to step back instead of being in the middle of it. I was able to step back and see my parents did the best they could. They were broken themselves. No matter how hard they tried in their faith, they were still broken. So it was definitely a healing and eye-opening.
Yeah.
Be able to say, you weren't the fool you thought you were. You were doing the best you could with what you had.
And what's incredible about that is you said yes to God. You went to Bible college. You worked hard. You first went to Russia and moved on to Hungary and worked with these young ladies. It's like God was like, you said yes, now I'm going to take you on a healing journey, and in this healing journey others are going to be healed as well. You're going to bring healing and bring me to others, and see how God, what He does. And it's not always easy, and sometimes the healing process is painful and brings you to the brokenness of others. And you think to yourself, seriously, God, this is how it happens? But
exactly.
That's the way God works sometimes, right? That's the way He works. And so doing the hard work of healing, of saying yes to Jesus and letting Him do what it takes in our lives to heal us, is so important. It's nothing to be afraid of. Definitely is a process. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely. And I mean, it was a hard process, because being raised in church, not all churches teach that healing comes through struggle. I was raised in a church, well, just pray about it. If you pray about it, if you have enough faith, it'll go away, type thing.
Right.
And it was like, oh, no. If you really truly pray for God to move, He's going to slap you upside the head. It was like, I went from, these, Lord God help me, to, I remember we as a missionary group, we would have prayer to where, in the Bible, when it says that David was prostrate before the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Prayer time became intense like that, to where we were literally laying face down, praying, Lord God, I don't know how you're going to get us through this. I don't know what you want me to do in this situation, but only you.
Yes.
So yeah, it was a struggle, but it helped grow my faith.
Yeah.
But then I was sent home. Basically, civil war broke out
Oh,
in the neighboring country of Yugoslavia.
Wow.
And things were getting really dicey because we were right on the border.
Okay.
And at that time, I found out that I had no more support money because a member of the church staff had been basically taking my support money. So I was forced off the field by two different things. So I came home as a rebel, but not as a good rebel this time.
You came home a little mad. Like, God, I'm doing everything you tell me to do. I'm out here in the mission field. I'm doing everything. And once again, human beings have messed this up. Now, there's this misconception that when you accept Jesus and you're around Christians, you get into the mission field or into the church, or you volunteer at church, or you're on staff at a church or a nonprofit, a Christian nonprofit or something, that everybody around you is just perfect. And life is going to be perfect, and everything's going to be good and smooth sailing, and there's nothing but healing and joy and everything's good. That is so not the truth, is it? Because we're human beings.
Exactly.
And we are all flawed and all sinful. And so the mistakes, some of us make mistakes and sin against God, and we are the only ones who suffer the consequences. And then others of us sin against God, and people around us suffer the consequences as well. And that's just the way it is. But because we keep our eyes on people instead of seeking God, all of a sudden that shakes our faith. And so that's kind of what happened to you, correct?
Oh, big time. I came home and I was angry. I was hurt. I was mortified. I was embarrassed. Because I was like, well, what happened to my calling? Like, I knew I was called, but I was like, this is not how it's supposed to happen.
Right.
I shouldn't have to call my brother to pay for a round trip ticket home because I can't even afford a plane ticket home. It was like, I'm calling my brother up at like, I don't know, it was probably like 3 or 4 in the morning, his time, getting him out of bed. And I was just like, they're bombing Yugoslavia and the fighter jets are flying over Hungary. And the embassy is saying that we as Americans need to register so they know where we're at in case everything breaks out so they can rescue us. I need to come home. And oh, by the way, I don't have any money. Can you send me a plane ticket? Yeah. So that was, I got home and I was very angry. One of the assistant pastors on staff, love him dearly. He tried to talk me down. He apologized, even though it wasn't his place to apologize. And I said, thank you, but no thanks. And I turned my back and walked away for the next 7 years.
And in that time, that's when you told us your story of your abusive relationship, and that he almost killed you. You almost died in that. And if you missed that story, you're going to have to go back. I believe it was in Psalm, when we're talking about Psalm 23. Incredible. Actually, I think what I'll do is I'll put that portion of your story in my blogs on my website, NicholeChavez.com. And I see H-O-L-E Chavez, CHAVEZ.com. You can go and read that story. But the powerful part to me was at the end of your story. So you were in a coma from this last encounter with your ex-boyfriend. And when you woke up, tell us about the scripture, the first thing that came to your mind.
I had absolutely no memories when I woke up. I didn't even have a clue who I was. Didn't know what had happened. The nurses asked me to identify myself. They knew who I was, but they're like, "Do you know your name?" No.
Wow.
Um, and the first thing that came to my mind was Psalms 23:4.
Mm.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I probably won't be able to get through it. Um, Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Um, I might not have liked my childhood,
Mm-hmm.
but thank God for being raised in the church, because those Awana Bible drills stick in your head. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know where I was. All I knew is that I was hooked up to life support, and that was the first thing that came to my mind.
And that God was with you, and
Yeah.
He told you that by bringing the scripture that you had learned when you were younger to your remembrance. And so the very first words you heard was God telling you, I'm with you, and not to fear any evil, for He is with you. And that is incredible. And that has been the story of your life, that there's been tragedy and there has been triumph. But all along the way, God has been with you through every bit of your story. And here you are today, sharing the message, your God story, with
Yeah.
hundreds of women who I know are encouraged by your story, who look at their life. It's funny. I read a post years and years ago on social media that if everybody threw their problems into a pile, that we'd probably still pick our own problems. We'd pick our own life back up and say, I don't want that one. I
Yeah,
don't want that one. I'll take my own. At least I'm familiar with that.
exactly.
But our stories are unique to us, and how God heals and works through those stories are also unique to us. And they're so encouraging when you can see yourself in a little bit of somebody else's story and see that God didn't abandon them, which means He won't abandon me either. So, ladies, I don't know where you're at. I don't know what you've been through. I don't know what part of Paula's story is sticking with you, brought tears to your eyes, brought chills to your body, or an ache in your heart, because you understand, because you've been there. Know that her story, her God story, has been redeemed because of God. And He does not leave us, and He does not forsake us, that He is there always with us. And we don't have to fear anything, because He is there. And He's with you too, no matter what is going on in your life, no matter how deep the hurt, no matter how long the abuse, no matter what you've done in your past that won't leave your mind. No matter what's going on, God is with you, and He will redeem it. And even if you wake up one day and can't even remember your name, it doesn't matter, because God remembers your name. And He'll speak to you through His word, and He'll speak to your heart, and He'll bring you through, and He'll heal and redeem this life. And He turns it around to good. And all of a sudden, that story becomes your God story, as Paula just shared. Paula, thank you so much for sharing. I know we just scraped the top of your story, and that is crazy and incredible. And I so relate to a lot of your story. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is, don't put faith in man, put faith in God. He'll never leave us or abandon us. And to let Him work and always run back to Him and allow Him to heal. And some of those choices that we make because of things that have happened to us, those are redeemable as well. We tend to look at our story and say, God, redeem the part of me, heal the part of me that everybody else has done. We don't like to look at the path that we took, that we chose, because of what's happened in our life, but it was still our choice, and God redeems and heals that as well. But again, Paula, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your story. I know it takes a lot. It takes bravery, and it takes being courageous and setting aside insecurity and a little bit of pride to tell our mistakes. And you just did it so beautifully. So thank you so much for sharing. And I hope so many more ladies are willing to do the same thing, because we all have a story. We all have a God story, and we want to hear it. So if you have a God story that you want to share, will you do me a favor and just email me or message me and let me know that you would love to share your story, and we can have a conversation. so you can share it as well. I love you guys. We will see you on Monday for Connect with God. I am so excited about the month of July. We are going to be studying scriptures about the enemy. So important, guys. If you listen to only 3 this entire year, it's going to be the 3 weeks in July that we'll be talking about the enemy. I think it's important to know your enemy. It's important to know your God, obviously, first and foremost. We do have an enemy that's working against us to kill and steal and destroy our lives. We have to know who he is. We have to be able to recognize him. We have to call him out for who he is. And we have to be victorious over this. And we can only be victorious when we know what we're dealing with. So join me for the next 3 weeks as we deal with learning about our enemy. So I love you guys. We will see you on Monday for Connect with God, and have a great week.
Bye, guys.